The lake's whispers. It was supposed to be a weekend of escape. 5 of us. Me, my girlfriend Chloe, and our 3 college friends Mark, Lisa, and Ben. We'd rented an isolated cabin deep in the woods, nestled beside a still, dark lake. Crystal Lake, the old listing called it. The name felt familiar somehow, a distant echo of a nightmare, but none of us could place why. We were just eager to get away from exam stress, from the city's relentless noise, from the constant demands of adulthood creeping in. No internet, no cell service, just pure, untainted nature. A chance to reconnect, to laugh, to drink too much bad beer around a crackling campfire. The first day was idyllic. The sun warmed our skin as we swam in the surprisingly clear water, its surface shimmering like 1,000 scattered diamonds. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, and the distant, mournful cry of a loon seemed to be the only sound that dared break the perfect tranquility. We hiked winding trails, told silly stories until our bellies ached, and felt the tension of city life slowly drain away. As dusk settled, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple, a cold front rolled in with an almost unnatural swiftness. The air grew sharp, biting, carrying the metallic tang of an approaching storm. The trees swayed with a sudden mournful sigh, their branches clawing at the darkening sky, and the lake's surface, once placid, became ruffled with dark, restless waves that lapped ominously at the shore. We retreated inside, lit the fireplace, its flames casting dancing shadows that flickered with every gust of wind, and the 5 of us huddled together, the warmth of the fire a comforting contrast to the biting chill outside. That night, things started. Small things, again. Things easily dismissed. The cabin's old porch swing, which we'd securely tied with thick rope to prevent it from swaying in the wind, began to creak, a rhythmic, lonely sound, a slow, deliberate squeak, 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 as if someone was gently swaying on it, just beyond our sight. We checked, of course. No one was there. The wind, we told ourselves, even though the air outside had quieted considerably. It always is. Then, later, a heavy, resonant thud from upstairs, directly above us. Ben, ever the joker, claimed it was the ghost of a lonely hermit dropping his dentures. We laughed, but the sound was too heavy, too deliberate, too final to be a house settling or a branch falling. It felt like something had been intentionally, forcefully placed. The next morning, the air was still, and an oppressive stillness hung over the lake, as if the very air was holding its breath. A thick, almost tangible silence pressed in from all sides, broken only by the distant, guttural croak of a crow that sounded less like a bird and more like a warning. The sky was a uniform, bruised gray. We decided to spend the day exploring a small, overgrown path that led deeper into the woods, away from the lake. It was dense, tangled, the trees growing so thick their gnarled branches intertwined overhead, blocking out the sun and plunging us into a perpetual twilight. The air grew colder, damp with the smell of decaying leaves. Mark, leading the way, suddenly stopped dead in his tracks, his blood running cold. "Guys," he said, his voice barely a whisper, strained with a terror I'd never heard from him before. "Look." Nailed crudely but undeniably to the rough bark of a massive ancient oak tree was a familiar object, a hockey mask, Not a pristine replica, but an old, weathered one. Its white plastic was stained with what looked like dried mud, and something darker, more ominous. A rusty brown that could have been anything. But our minds immediately leaped to one terrifying conclusion. Its eye holes stared out, empty, yet filled with an unspoken menace that sent shivers down my spine. A silent, malevolent gaze. The air around it felt heavy, thick with an inexplicable dread, a sudden piercing cold that cut through our jackets despite the lack of wind. We stood there, frozen, our casual bravado of city lives melting away like snow in a furnace, replaced by a primal, gut-wrenching dread. This wasn't just a prop left by previous renters, a tasteless joke. This was a warning, a monument. Chloe, usually so rational, so grounded, whispered, her voice barely audible. Crystal Lake. Jason Voorhees. This is that Crystal Lake. The words hung in the oppressive air, heavy with unspoken dread, echoing the chilling realization that had just slammed into all of us. The legend, the campfire stories, the slasher films, they all coalesced into a terrifying, undeniable reality. We didn't need to discuss it. We turned, our hearts pounding a frantic drumbeat against our ribs, and walked back to the cabin, not running, not screaming, but moving with a desperate, controlled urgency, glancing over our shoulders every few seconds, convinced that an unseen presence was stalking us, a silent hunter through the dense, whispering undergrowth, its unseen eyes fixed on our backs. Back at the cabin, fear began to twist our perceptions, turning every mundane sound into a potential threat. Every rustle of leaves sounded like heavy footsteps approaching. Every distant snap of a twig like a deliberate, calculated advance. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in blood-red streaks that mirrored the terror in our hearts. And a thick, oppressive fog, cold and damp, rolled in from the lake, swallowing the cabin whole, turning the world outside into a murky, indistinct blur. We barricaded the doors with chairs and tables, covered the windows with blankets and towels, trying to create a sanctuary. But the cold dread had already seeped in, chilling us to the bone from the inside out. Then the power went out, not with a flicker, not with a groan, but a sudden absolute plunge into darkness, rendering our hastily erected barricades useless against the all-consuming void. Lisa screamed, a thin, high sound of pure, unadulterated terror that seemed to tear the fabric of the silence. Mark fumbled for his phone, then remembered the cruel irony of our chosen isolation. No service, no connection to the outside world. We lit candles, their flickering flames casting dancing, distorted shadows that seemed to mock our fear, turning familiar objects into grotesque, shifting monsters. The first attack came through the back door, a sickening thud, splintering wood, followed by another, and another, each blow resonating through the very foundations of the cabin. Something heavy, powerful, was trying to break in, methodically, relentlessly. Mark, clutching a rusty fireplace poker he'd found by the hearth, tried to shout, "Who's there? We have a weapon!" But his voice was thin, reedy, barely a whisper, betraying the raw terror that choked him. The door shuddered under the relentless assault, wood cracking, hinges groaning under an immense, unnatural force that defied human strength. Ben, panicked, his face pale and slick with sweat, scrambled for the old, dust-covered rifle we'd found in a closet, a relic from the cabin's previous owners. Its ancient, corroded barrel, a poor, pathetic comfort against the unseen force. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the thudding stopped. A profound, suffocating silence descended, a silence that felt heavier, more terrifying than the assault itself. We waited, our breaths held, straining our ears for any sound, any movement. And then, a faint, almost imperceptible splash from the lake, followed by another, further away. "He's in the water," Chloe whispered, her voice trembling, her eyes wide with dawning horror. "He's going around." Terror gave way to a desperate, illogical hope. Maybe he was gone. Maybe he'd left. We were wrong. A chilling, deafening crash shattered the night, coming from the living room. The large picture window overlooking the lake had been smashed inward with a single brutal blow, showering jagged shards of glass across the floor with a terrifying tinkling sound. Through the gaping hole, silhouetted against the thick, swirling fog, was a towering figure, broad-shouldered, impossibly tall, and wearing that horrifying hockey mask, its empty eye-holes seeming to bore directly into our souls. In his hand, glinting wetly in the faint candlelight, was a rusty machete, its edge catching the light with a malevolent gleam. He stepped through the broken window, slowly, methodically, not bothering to duck, as if the shattered frame was merely an inconvenience, a nuisance to be ignored. He was pure malevolence, silent, unstoppable, a force of nature given form. Ben raised the rifle, his hands shaking so violently he could barely hold it steady, the old weapon rattling in his grasp. "Get out!" he screamed, his voice cracking, the gun barrel wavering wildly. He fired. The shot echoed deafeningly in the small cabin, momentarily blinding us with its muzzle flash, the smell of gunpowder stinging our nostrils. The figure didn't even flinch. The bullet had no effect, simply absorbed by his impossible bulk. He just kept coming. A relentless force of pure, undiluted terror, his heavy boots crunching on the broken glass. The next few minutes were a blur of screaming, of desperate, futile attempts to escape, a chaotic, horrifying dance with death. Mark, in a surge of desperate courage, tried to tackle him, a brave but suicidal act. I heard a sickening thud as his body collided with the immovable force, followed by a choked gasp, and Mark was gone, dragged into the oppressive darkness beyond the shattered window, consumed by the swirling fog, his screams abruptly cut short. Lisa, screaming hysterically, tried to run for the front door, slipping on the treacherous glass, her panicked cries cut short by a wet, gurgling sound that made my blood run cold. Chloe clung to me, sobbing uncontrollably, her body racked with tremors, her nails digging into my arm. "We have to run," I choked out, my voice raw with terror, pulling her towards the back. The back door, previously assaulted, was now hanging off its hinges, a gaping maw into the foggy night, a dark promise of escape. We scrambled through, not looking back, not daring to, the chilling sounds of the cabin fading behind us. The fog was a disorienting shroud, thick and cold, pressing in from all sides, muffling all sound, turning the world into an endless gray void. I could hear Chloe's ragged breathing, my own heart hammering a frantic rhythm in my ears, a desperate drumbeat against the silence. We ran blindly, crashing through undergrowth, stumbling over roots, our clothes torn, our bodies aching, our lungs burning. I could feel a presence behind us, not close enough to see, but a palpable sense of pursuit, of a silent hunter following our every move. Relentless, inevitable, never tiring. The air grew colder, the fog denser, swallowing us whole. Then, the faint, undeniable sound of water. The lake. We burst onto the rocky shore, gasping for breath, our lungs burning, our clothes soaked with dew and fear. The lake was a vast, dark expanse, swallowed by the fog, its surface barely visible, a black mirror, reflecting nothing but the oppressive gray. And then we heard it, a faint, almost imperceptible splash behind us, closer this time. He wasn't on the shore. He was in the water. He was always in the water. Chloe turned around, her eyes wide with pure, unfiltered terror, fixed on something invisible in the mist behind us. "No," she whimpered, her voice a thin, trembling thread, a desperate plea caught in the sharp, frigid air. It was a sound that seemed to tear through the stillness of the night itself, a wail of despair that froze the blood in my veins. I turned too, my heart pounding like a frantic drum against my ribs, and through the swirling curtain of mist, I saw it. A dark shape, impossibly large, emerging from the murky depths of the lake, silent as a ghost. It was Jason. His hulking silhouette was unmistakable, the hockey mask a pale, ghostly beacon in the gloom. He was even more terrifying in the fog, a silent, relentless predator, appearing as if from nowhere, an embodiment of the lake's dark heart. He moved with calm, methodical grace, his powerful body cutting through the water effortlessly, seemingly undisturbed by the cold, the darkness, or our palpable fear. In his right hand, the rusted machete glistened wetly, a silent promise of heinous violence. Every drop of water dripping from it seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 deaths. Chloe let out a strangled scream, a sound of pure, primal despair, and tried to run, her feet stumbling on the slick, wet rocks. But the fog had completely disoriented us. We were surrounded, lost in a gray vortex, the water lapping menacingly at our ankles. There was nowhere to go, no escape. The air around us felt heavy, thick with his presence, suffocating any hope. He was upon us in an instant, moving with a speed that belied his massive size. He didn't speak. He never spoke. He simply raised the machete, moonlight catching its wicked blade, and brought it down with chilling precision. Chloe screamed, a raw, piercing sound that sliced through the mist-choked air. A scream that ended abruptly, smothered by a wet, sickening thud. I saw her collapse, a lifeless ragdoll, into the lake's dark waters, her blood blooming like a terrible, dark flower on the surface, quickly consumed by the fog. The silence that followed was more terrifying than any scream. I was alone. Completely, terribly alone. My mind reeled, shattered by the sudden and brutal reality of it all. Mark, Lisa, Ben, now Chloe, all gone. All gone, and I would be next. Cold panic gripped me, paralyzing every fiber of my being. He turned his masked gaze to me, the empty eye hole seeming to pierce straight into my soul. A silent, unwavering stare that promised pure, unfiltered horror. He began to advance, slowly and methodically, his heavy boots crunching on the wet gravel, water dripping from his clothes, each drop a tiny splash in the oppressive silence. The smell of stagnant water, and something else, something metallic and rotting filled the air. I tried to scream, but no sound escaped my throat. I tried to run, but my legs felt like lead, rooted in place by sheer, paralyzing fear. My breath caught in my throat, each gasp a painful struggle. He was less than 10 feet away. The machete rose again, reflecting the pale, ghostly light of the moon shrouded in mist, a shining herald of my end. I closed my eyes, bracing for the inevitable, a futile, pathetic gesture against the unstoppable force of nature before me. I heard the whoosh of the blade slicing through the air, felt the cold current of its movement, the agonizing sense of my own impending doom. And then, nothing. I opened my eyes, cautiously, slowly, expecting to be looking at a bruised gray sky, my life slipping away. But I was still standing. He was gone. The fog still hung thickly, swirling around me, but he had vanished, as silently and inexplicably as he had appeared. Only the stillness of the lake remained. Faint ripples where Chloe's body had fallen, and the persistent metallic scent of blood in the air, a testament to the horrors that had just unfolded. The silence was crushing, broken only by the wild pounding of my own heart. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, trembling, my teeth chattering uncontrollably, my mind a blank canvas of pure, unfiltered trauma. Then, the first faint hint of dawn began to break through the oppressive mist, a weak, ethereal glow on the horizon, painting the world in hues of purple and gray. The rising sun, a cruel mockery of hope, slowly began to burn away the surrounding fog, revealing the silent, empty landscape of the lake. I walked. I don't remember how far or for how long. I just walked, blindly, mechanically, putting one foot in front of the other, my body an automaton, fueled by shock and a desperate need to escape the silent horror that haunted my every step. Eventually, hours later, I stumbled onto a remote, dusty road, my clothes torn, my skin scraped and bruised, my mind a shattered mess. They found the cabin a few days later, just as I had described it. The broken window, the shattered door, the scattered glass. But there were no bodies, no sign of a struggle, no evidence that anyone else had ever been there, except for my own footprints leading away from the lake. The authorities dismissed it as a hallucination, a breakdown caused by stress and isolation, a vivid nightmare. They called me lucky, told me I had suffered a traumatic break from reality. But I know what I saw, I know what I heard, and I know what happened to my friends. Sometimes, in the stillness of the night, when the rain falls or the wind howls, I still hear the faint, distant squeak, squeak, squeak of a porch swing. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see that hockey mask, white and stark, against the empty dark eye sockets, peering out from the swirling mist, and the gleam of a rusted machete. They say Crystal Lake is beautiful, peaceful, serene, a perfect retreat. But I know better. I know the lake's whispers, and I know he is always there, lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for the next unsuspecting group of visitors to come into his domain, waiting for the long, dark night, waiting for the fog to settle, to claim his next victims. And I know, with chilling certainty, that he will be waiting forever. He never stops. He never sleeps. And he never truly leaves Crystal Lake.